Despite some concerns that their first outing and the dangers involved in it might cause some stress to the crew, surprisingly, it had worked the opposite direction. Many of the crewmates were beginning to form fast friendships with each other. Apparently, the danger of the situation had acted as a bonding experience, bringing them closer together as a crew, which was a delight to Captain Mika, who, unfortunately, due to the situation, all of the changes, staff adding, redesigning, and many other changes that were taking place, had spent most of her time dealing with the ins and outs of getting everyone situated and ensuring that the ship and its crew were working efficiently and that everyone's needs were taken care of, and as such was in her office, trying to work her way through an engineering report, when the door alarm sounded, signaling that someone was on the other side wishing to enter. Come in," Mika said, as the doors opened, and in walked the statuesque figure of Dolus, her first mate. "Hello, Captain. How are you faring?" Dolus said, approaching the desk that Mika was sitting at working, as calm and controlled as Dolus usually was. Well, to be honest, I could be faring better. I can't wait until all of these renovations are worked through. It's giving me a mind-numbing amount of tedious work to do. All the crew members want their own say on the recreations room and what the menu will be like for the new mess hall. There are so many different opinions, and it's of course left up to me, the captain, to decide which ones to keep and which ones to throw out. Which kind of makes me the bad guy and the good guy, all at the same time. It's not an enviable position, Mika said, rubbing her forehead in frustration. "Well, I'm most sorry to hear that, Captain. I simply came in to give you my report." "Your report?" Mika replied. "What report?" "Oh, it's nothing that you asked me for. It's simply in my duties as first mate. I found it useful to write reports, analyze statistics, and probabilities regarding our activities," he said, as he held a datapad forward towards Mika, who put the datapad she was currently holding down to grasp it, and began looking it over, quickly finding that it was a list of statistical analysis and probabilities for their confrontation with the Rota ship and battle, listing both what actually happened, as well as the probability ratios on whether that course of action was the probable outcome, listing other probable outcomes, whether they were more or less likely, leaning very heavily towards more likely. "Dolus, did you grade me?" Mika said, eyebrows raised as she looked up at Dolus. "I believe grading would be a poor choice of words. I simply gave you an analysis. On my homeworld, it's customary to review one's own actions and their effects. So far, you show a statistical ability to, well, break statistics. As far as the numbers are concerned, we should all be dead right now. But somehow, you seem to have beaten the odds. But I wouldn't be doing my due diligence if I didn't give you a proper assessment as your first mate. This is not a grading process, pass or fail. You successfully navigated the course of events, and our survival on the other side is your victory. This is simply information that you might better understand both yourself and capabilities. Something to learn from." not a measure of failure or success. Well, thanks, I guess, Mika said, feeling a bit perplexed about how to respond, before deciding to change the subject, not wanting to get into facts and figures as they were never her strong suit. Well, tell me, Dolus, have you been getting any relaxation time? I afforded all of the members of the crew some well-earned rest. How did you spend yours? For a moment, Dolus stood silent, as if he was questioning how to respond, or whether to respond at all. Well, typically, talking about one's private life during work would be a conflict, and would only serve to hinder our effectiveness as captain and first mate. However, statistics show that a certain level of bonding between crew members can yield positive results in effectiveness during work. Some of these bonding experiences include sharing private details of one's own life. So I suppose, given the terms, it is acceptable for you to ask, and reasonable for me to respond, at least with some details. As far as my own recreational activities, during our stay on Kothia, many members of the crew bartered for access to a large assortment or library of books, as well as downloaded a large amount of Kothian media, movies, television shows, holo-programs, things of that nature. Games. I'm not quite the gamer myself. However, many of the crew members seem to favor them. I myself have become embroiled within a Kothian love drama, The Stars of Asarel, the story of a group of star-crossed lovers, vying for each other's affection and attention. It's quite riveting. My favorite character being Motia, a somewhat demure astrophysicist, whose main attraction seems to be for a Kothian soldier. However, he's no good for her. Far too selfish. And she seems to be completely unaware that her lab assistant is head over heels for her. As I said, the show is riveting. Wow, Dolus, I never pictured you as the love drama type. But I suppose that there's always more to a book than just its cover. Thanks for giving me that little insight. Quite frankly, I'm having trouble picturing you being enthralled with an emotional drama. I suppose it's just your work persona. You, Mose, are very good at compartmentalization. Honestly, it's hard to tell if you have emotions. I mean, I know you do, but you separate them from your work so well that it's hard to imagine you actually using them. But maybe I'm being a little bit judgmental, based on the way that I was raised myself, Mika replied. Well, you shared something about you, so I suppose it's only fair that I share something about me too, right? Mika asked, looking over to Dolus. Well, if you feel it is necessary, Captain. No problem. Well, what do we have here? Mika said, as she leaned forward, placing her hands on the desk in front of her. Well, I'm sorry to say, but I don't really have a lot when it comes to happy memories. And I haven't exactly had any downtime that I could share with you. So I suppose I'll go with something a little bit more personal, Mika said, pulling the comb out of her hair that she always wore. This is something that's actually fairly special to me. It's actually a family heirloom. Well, the only family heirloom that's left. Usually people of my race have a fairly wide selection of children before they pass. I was meant to have many brothers and sisters. However, my parents were killed when I was still very young. They had only been married for about 10 years, and my mother was actually carrying another child when she was killed that I never got to meet. But before she passed, she handed down to me this family heirloom. It was a comb that was handmade by my great-great-great-grandmother. Technically, it's very valuable in a monetary sense, which is probably what brought about my family's death in the first place. The Oki don't put monetary value on things. In the Oki culture, the only thing that truly has value are things that have sentimental value, like this comb. If I were to sell it at market, I could probably buy a small ship with it. But its sentimental value far exceeds its monetary one. The eldest female child in my family has inherited it for every generation since its construction. And one day I'll pass it to my own daughter. Well, if I survive to have one. It's really the only thing that I have left from my mother and father. It's basically what reminds me who I am and where I come from. So you're never going to catch me without it. I'd rather die than give it up. Well, I think that's about all that I'm ready to get into for now. Unless you want to hear my whole tale of heartbreak, that is. Perhaps another time, Captain. I do not wish to add to your stress. Talking about such heartbreaking stories may affect your performance, especially when you're already under duress. But I thank you for sharing all the same. And such an important thing as well. Among my culture, we consider secrets gifts. When someone shares a secret with you, it is something to be honored and respected. It is a show of trust for the individual. And so for the gift of this secret, I am honored, Captain, Dola said, taking a slight bow towards Mika. Well, I suppose that I have other duties to attend to, and I don't want to interrupt your work. But there are a lot of new intakes in forms of books and recreation. I would be remiss as your first mate if I did not advise you to get some rest, Captain. Try to relax, however you see fit. Being overworked might negatively affect you, Dola said, as he turned around, walking towards the door, hands clasped behind his back, and exiting without another word.